Kumusta? Maligayang pagbabalik sa akin channel. I hope that you guys had a wonderful weekend. Today, apparently, we're gonna be learning about how Filipino-Americans became super rich, super wealthy. Now, this is very interesting, but I don't know exactly what this is about. Are they gonna select a few rich Filipino Americans that they're gonna be talking about, or is this a known thing, like Filipino Americans are generally rich? You know what I'm saying? So that is very intriguing, and that is why I agreed to react to this video. But before we start, make sure to follow me on Instagram at Music Game News, because that is where you can DM your suggestions. And without further ado, let's jump right into it.
When the U.S. Census Bureau released the American Community Survey in 2019, they found a very interesting feat among its median household income amongst its population. Filipino Americans emerged to become the second highest earners amongst every Asian American race around the nation.
Let's rewind, because that's very interesting what he said.
Filipino Americans emerged to become the second highest earners amongst every Asian American race around the nation of the United States, registering incomes of about $100,000, a figure that almost doubles that of white Americans, whereas they had only $65,000 in median.
Yeah, second, because as you can see, it's India number one with 126,000, and then right under it is the Philippines with 100,000 and $273. Okay, and right after is Taiwan. Yeah, Taiwan, and then Indonesia, and then with 85 is China. Okay, yep.
In household income. The same data has shown that they are far ahead of all other races, whether they are Chinese American, Japanese American, and so on. They are only behind Indian Americans, which stand as the highest group in the study the U.S. Census Bureau had done so far. In all honesty, this has been quite a shocking figure. Filipinos, compared to other races.
You know, I'm already liking this video, because usually in these types of videos, you don't actually have a person narrating and explaining things. They usually use AI for the voice, you know, and that's a little... It's not personal enough. You know, when you have a human being talk to you, it's much more personal and it feels better.
Groups often come from nations with lower economic levels compared to their counterpart races with less access to better education. Yet they have strived to come out on top, to become such a figure among Asian Americans. So how could Filipino Americans become such a leading figure in the world's richest nation? How did they even triumph over the largest population group, which is white Americans? Well, to answer all these, we must...
But you can see it the other way around. It's like, because, you know, they struggled so much in the past, you know, like their parents and their grandparents, they struggled in their country. They knew what poverty, you know, is. That is why, you know, their children and grandchildren, when they went to the US, made sure to succeed, because they know how, you know, what poverty is. You know what I'm saying?
First, take a look back at history. What drove Filipinos to sail and fly towards the United States, and how they fought through difficulties to arrive at where they sit today. Around the 16th century, Asians, particularly Filipino sailors, emerged as the first ever Asians to have arrived and immigrated to the United States.
Okay.
One that is to many quite shocking, as documents or historians alike tend to debate upon.
On the West Coast,
oldest
probably.
documentation found that these Filipinos had arrived around the October of 1587 and had an official permanent migration in 1763. This surpasses all other documentation of any other Asians having been found to arrive in North America.
Really?
This wave of immigration, as they call it, had consistently then emerged since the official documentation that has been found. More so, however, the largest and most significant that enlarged the community of Filipinos in America had been done in the 20th century. This was the time when the Philippines was a territory of the United States, and Filipinos were not restricted from immigration to the U.S. as indicated by the Immigration Act of 1917. This initiative, done by the United States, had been seen as an opportunity, on the other hand, by Filipinos, as it was well thought out that they could earn far more and be able to provide better monetary means to their family back in the Philippines had they worked.
And if you think about it, it's still the case. Filipinos, still go abroad to work to provide for their family in the Philippines. And this makes complete sense because before I started reacting to Filipino content, I thought that the Asian country that had more people in the US was maybe Korea or China, But if you think about it, it would make sense that it would be the Philippines because Filipinos were colonized by the US, right? So they spoke English. So it is definitely easier for them to immigrate to the US, because they don't have a language barrier
in the US. Hence, Filipino-Americans had grown in numbers, from having a tiny population of only 400 to over 5,600 in the 1920s.
Okay.
Then the coming decade saw its immigration rise to over 45,000. With such a wave of immigrants,
More
the
than
U.S.
double.
government had to slow down these numbers. By the 1960s, they had changed their policies with immigration reform, and after that, immigration had slowed as only skilled professionals were, in most cases, allowed to go to the country.
They were
there had
more
been,
strict.
however, exceptions to this rule, as some Filipinos who had served in the Second World War were allowed to become U.S. citizens, which then further increased the Filipino-American population to greater heights, posing them as one of the largest Asian groups in the United States. Lastly, after these great immigration waves, there still stands one more, which is the current wave we are at. After the Immigration and Nationality Act of 1965, which gave the option to have family reunification by providing visas to Filipinos or other groups to invite their families to the U.S. This wave enabled the Filipinos to become the largest source of legal immigrants to the United States from Asia. The majority of them were known to be Filipino.
This is probably called sponsorship, when like your son or your parent becomes an American, they can sponsor their, a member of their family to also become American, probably.
Nurses and had helped reduce the shortages in medical fields. This trend in Filipinos in the medical studies as immigrants would rise and become one of the most important factors to the U.S. as they would become one of the largest groups working in the field.
That's crazy.
Today, there are approximately 4.2 million Filipinos in the U.S., either through their ancestry or recent immigrants. The majority of them today.
If you think about it, this number is massive. I mean, there are some small countries that have less people than this. A full country with less than 4.2 million people, But the US has 4.2 million Filipinos in their country. It's huge.
Now are regarded as skilled people. This imposes the question we needed answers for. It is because around the 1930s to 1960s, with the immigration reform, the U.S. had only allowed skilled laborers. Hence, this helped push that selective groups of people who can actually perform for the United States country. Hence, one of the many reasons why Filipinos have become so rich is that they were selective people. Selective people who are amongst the top of the ladder in the Philippines population were doctors, nurses, engineers, and so on. This is one of the reasons why we presumably think that.
So basically, the US let the best of the Philippines immigrate to the US, so the smartest and the most skilled Filipinos that when they made it to the US, became rich, of course, because they are skilled and smart and they know what they're doing. Yeah.
there had been a lack of professional people in the country, as they had left the mainland to seek better opportunities. For that matter, on the other hand, is an entirely different thing, as it is also noted that these immigrants had been one of the backbones of growth for the country of the Philippines, done through remittance, which has been averaging over $30 to $35 billion annually, which is around 10% of the total nominal gross domestic product of the Philippines.
Wow.
Further, Filipinos are known to be hooked into the medical field, commonly nurses. This is again one of the reasons why they are being paid so high, as medical professionals also on average in the US earn a lot more than any other profession. Another reason is that another population group had also influenced its overall income standing, which was soldier immigrants. Army officers back in those days had given offspring to newly born Filipino-Americans.
And by the way, this is not a joke. Like, this is 100% real. Like, there are a lot of Filipinos that work in the nursing field. And I can attest to that because I talk to a lot of you, on Instagram and on social media. And very often you tell me, I'm a caregiver, I'm a nurse, very often. So this is no joke. And it's not just in the US, a lot of you also are nurses in many other countries. And a lot of you are nurses in, the Emirates and places like that. Saudi Arabia, I think, Qatar, maybe, I don't know.
Who had emerged to follow the paths of their parents or grandparents and hence paved the way for Filipinos serving in the United States Army. Some of them bring their medical expertise with them, hence paving the way for a higher wage earning group. Finally, we also cannot disregard the fact that the first and foremost reasons why Filipinos arrived in the US. This is likewise as we presumably thought had occurred as well for Indian Americans, because they came to the world's largest economy to pursue better dreams and opportunities to help back their mainland, either that direct to their nation or their family. With such a higher purpose of living, unlike other Asian groups who may not need to do so as their family is well enough knit provided by their strong economies in Asia, Filipinos do not seem to have the same opportunity. But data might be segregated, as most of the reasons argued by historians are that they really are affected by these selective immigrants. Only those who have proper education have been allowed to enter, and more
Pause, let's read this. Hilger's research focuses on native-born whites, blacks, and Asians to rule out the effect of subsequent immigration. In 1965, changing laws ushered in a surge of high-skilled, high-earning Asian workers who now account for most of the Asians living in the United States today. But even before the arrival of those highly educated immigrants, the Asians already living in the United States had more or less closed the wage gap with whites. And I know someone, I don't know if I would call this Filipino a nurse, but basically the job of this person is, during surgery, nurse or whatever you want to call that person that brings the surgery tools to the surgeon, right? That's his job. Well, that person makes a lot of money. I mean, 6 figures and up, and they live in San Francisco, which is a very expensive city to live in, So, yeah, it's a good paying job to be a nurse.
likely their offspring were forced to pursue higher goals as their parents had. Filipino-Americans have truly, in many ways, given their status on the world stage as profound people, yet as we noted earlier, it has also become an issue back in their home country. The Philippines at times are even struggling as it battles out numerous shortages, one particular in the medical field.
Oh,
this
really?
has been a huge problem during the medical crisis over the past 2 years, yet as data suggests, the Philippines is the world's #1 outsourcing of medical professionals. So,
see, that's what I was gonna say. This is, fine and dandy as long as it does not affect the original country, which is the Philippines. But according to this video, it did during the pandemic, right? So they had a shortage in nurses, which is very unfortunate since they are like the leading country in that field worldwide. It doesn't make any sense. So it's like those Filipinos that made it, outside of the Philippines have to find a way to help their own country as well. And I know it's easier said than done, but I just think it's unfortunate.
Even after being a medical-rich country,
wait.
there was no...
Let's read this. Why do many hospitals and clinics prefer the Philippines to outsource medical billing tasks? Many startup healthcare facilities want to outsource medical billing service in order to focus on their core function. So, hospital owners are naturally looking for a place where they can outsource billing services. But unlike other BPO functions, any outsourced medical-related task requires special qualifications. For starters, agents working on billing outsourcing services should have an experience talking with a patient. These callers already have enough stress because of their health conditions. In fact, 98% of patients have a bad impression of clinics that have poor telephone communication skills. Well, of course, because the phone is like the first contact with that service, with that clinic. It has to be top-notch. Ergo, you need to look for an outsourcing company that offers agents with experience in the medical industry. Okay, I understand.
Buddy back home that was working to provide the nation a helping hand. Moreover, there are also more issues and problems, even probably huge losses of opportunities had the Philippines retained its top talents in the national lands. Having over 4.3 million people in the US alone can also mean that millions of talents are now gone, leaving the Philippines battling out its issues, such as the unemployment rate, which is seen as amongst the highest in Asia. The conversation about its remittance economy could be positive, but its negatives would more than likely outweigh whatever economy they provide back in the Philippines. After all, if they were capable people to become the second richest Asian American group in the US, they could have done more for their Philippines. Then again, however, it would also be difficult to say had they stayed, as the nation lacks the proper infrastructure, proper education, and proper opportunities to provide for these dream-hungry people. So it would at most be very difficult or even impossible to imagine different scenarios had we wanted the
So basically, we can't really blame the ones who left, right? It's not up to them technically to make sure that the Philippines thrives, you know? It's up to the Philippines to make sure to find a way to, you know, let some of them go, you know, abroad, but also keep a bunch in the Philippines. Basically, you have to find a way to pay them properly, you know?
Your way around.
You need to find
matters,
incentives.
However, is that the Philippines today is doing its best to lure back its overseas Filipino workers by providing incentives such as business capital loans and more. One such is the BALIC Scientist Program, which entices technological, engineering, or science human capital to go back and help reverse the effect of brain drain, which has been one of the key issues the government has been trying to fix in recent years. With all that said and done, however, what do you think about Filipino-Americans? Let us know down below.
See, this was extremely interesting. I don't know about you, but I thought it was very interesting. But I felt like it was a video more about Filipino nurses that work in the US, you know? They didn't really talk about Filipino. Plus, the title is a little bit misleading. Because when I read Filipino-Americans, in my mind, it was a person that is half American and half Filipino. But what they mean here, it's Filipino that immigrated to the Philippines, to the US. Basically, full 100% Filipino, you know, that just immigrated to the US. But it was still very, very interesting. But yeah, I mean, it's a very complex topic, and it's not just the Philippines that has this issue, you know, because I'm from Algeria, and see, I'm an Algerian who, you know, had proper education and have some skills, you know, not trying to brag or anything, and that, you know, I'm doing fine in my life, and yet, you know, I chose to leave Algeria to immigrate not to the US but to Canada, you know, and I'm telling you, the people that immigrate outside of Algeria, they rarely go back to live in Algeria, you know, so that they could, you know, help the country thrive or whatever. So it's not a problem that is specific to the Philippines. That's what I'm trying to explain here. But yeah, let me know in the comment section below your thoughts on this very interesting topic. Maraming salamat po. And of course, if you have found value in this reaction video, then do not hesitate to check out my other videos right here.